Okay, next episode of Gotham 1939. Mr. Freeze himself. And this is 6 minutes and 21 seconds long. One of the shorter episodes. How many long episodes does this have so far? Well, not long. There are only 4 episodes so far that are above 10 minutes long, and there's one that's nearly 10 minutes, but not quite. And the last episode, Catwoman, is less than 10 minutes. This one is also less than 10 minutes. Had they run out of quality or something? Never mind. We're going to check out Mr. Freeze and see if it's integrated to this timeline perfectly. Because the last video we've watched with Catwoman, there is barely, if not anything, that is integrated into the time period it's set in.
In the wake of the Great War, fewer people were allowed immigration to the U.S. from Europe, but some were still admitted. One such person was Victor Fries, a scientist from Austria.
Well, that's my question.
He had traveled to America to further develop his research into the newly budding field of cryogenics. He expected to find much in his research, but what he did not expect to find was true love. It was here, in America, that Victor met Nora. The two fell in love and soon became married. She was the only one who could melt his heart. Soon, Victor's research began to gain the attention of many important people. He was approached by the board of GothCorp, the second biggest company in Gotham. They offered him funding for his research and a laboratory to house his experiments. With Victor at the lead, GothCorp was in a full-on technology race with Wayne Enterprises to find the next big breakthrough.
Oh, good.
This soon began to unravel, however, with the discovery that Nora was sick.
Oh, yes,
in fact, she was dying. Victor thought that his research might be the key to her salvation, beginning to embezzle funds from GothCorp to advance his experiments faster and faster. This did not go unnoticed, and he soon found himself being confronted by the GothCorp board of directors. They moved to forcibly shut down his experiments and lab, but Victor, in pure desperation, tried to stop them. His attempt resulted in machinery being knocked loose, spraying him with an experimental sub-zero substance he had developed.
Oh.
It changed the very fiber of his being, increasing his strength, allowing him to be immune to pain and sickness, but at a terrible cost. He could only survive in sub-zero temperatures.
Yep.
It was soon after this incident that his wife Nora passed away from her illness.
Oh my gosh. Nora dies in this? I mean, Nora was kept frozen until Mr. Freeze could find a cure, but here she dies. That's one hell of a step further. First Two-Face has his face scarred and lost an eye, which is a bit darker than just having his face scarred, and now this.
Victor, upon this tragic event, gave in to his anger over his grief. He constructed a suit that allowed his body to stay in an environment of extreme cold.
Ooh.
He weaponized his cryogenics technology, creating a freeze gun which he used to assault the members of GothCorp's board. His vendetta against those who, in his mind, were responsible for his wife's death rocked Gotham to its core. The city's occupants saw fluctuations in the weather, experiencing snow in the dead of summer, stretches of frozen road causing multiple accidents, and in some cases, death. The police tried their best, but Victor Fries, now dubbed Mr. Freeze by the Gotham Gazette, proved too much for them. The Batman,
Mr. Freeze looks good, I gotta say.
For his actions, confronted him, trying to reason with the broken man. Try as he might, Freeze's heart was cold as ice. The only person who could have thawed it was dead. In a climactic battle, the Batman defeated Freeze by breaching his containment suit, causing him to be incapacitated.
Jack Ryder here, bringing you a live report of the battle between...
I am legitimately surprised. Now they're doing news broadcasting. Where was this earlier?
The Batman and Mr.
Oh. I just noticed this premiered on my birthday. Okay. Coincidental birthday things aside. Where was Jack White write news broadcast earlier? That could have been much more flavored.
Freeze! Much of Gotham's business district is covered in a blizzard to rival the Knickerbocker storm of 22. The Batman seems to be gaining the upper hand. Oh, Freeze just blasted the bat with his freeze ray. Now Batman is reaching for one of his utility pouches. Zing, zing, pow! He knocked Freeze's gun right out of his hand. It looks like they're about to say something.
It's my fault, Batman. They're going to kill them and put them on us.
Victor, they had nothing to do with it. You'll pay for what you've done to this city.
Only time will tell whether or not the Dark Knight will be able to thaw this conundrum of cold. Stay tuned, Gothamites.
Okay, right now I just have a criticism with this. This does not sound convincing whatsoever. Jack does not sound like he's in a potentially dangerous situation or in a dangerous situation. And Victor and Batman both kind of sound like they're at an Adam West show. They sound like it. There is no danger whatsoever. I have not felt the anger with Mr. Freeze's voice. I have not heard of the caring and compassion or something with Batman, with him trying to confront Victor Freeze about the unfortunate stuff that's happening. And Jack White doesn't sound at all like he's in danger, but has to report it.
Because of his extreme condition,
Some
a special
birthday
containment
present.
cell was constructed for Mr. Freeze at Blackgate Federal Penitentiary. It allowed him to survive in lockup as long as he didn't try to escape. It was the start of Blackgate's special inmate program, which took into account special cases such as the Man-Bat and Killer Croc. Victor's story was a sad one, though eventually even his anger gave way to nothing but coldness. He was a shadow of the man he had once been, and there was no melting his heart this time. He remained a prisoner in Blackgate until it closed its doors. His enhanced biology allowed him to live much longer than the average man. Eventually, once the prison was closing, and having served his sentence, he was released in the dead of winter and wandered into the wilderness. Some claim he traveled to Antarctica where he could live out his days in peace, while others claim he died once winter passed.
Okay. Big props to somebody who is barefoot and in the snow.
No one knows for sure. Some of his technology surfaced during World War II on both sides of the war, but not much else is truly known about what happened to Victor Freeze.
In 1954, at the first Cryogenic Engineering Conference, his work was discussed in great detail.
Okay, what's up with the mic quality? It just went down a little bit, or the guy is just not being close to the mic.
For even in spite of his erratic behavior, Victor had made strides in the industry. His work helped lay the foundation for modern cryogenics. This did not absolve him entirely, however.
At the end of the day, his legacy was one of ice and cold.
Okay, admittedly, this episode, it's not very good. On the one hand, just like Two-Face, they decided to take one step further into being a bit darker. And they finally have a radio news broadcast, where was this in the previous videos? That probably would have made for... that probably would have made it a little bit more spicy, along maybe the interviews. I wish there were more interviews. But on the other hand, the radio thing, like I said, it is just delivered very poorly and unconvincingly. Aside from the aside from him being an immigrant, one of the few allowed in the time period, there's not really that much else that contributes to the timeline. There was like generic fighting sounds effect in the back, in the radio background. I forgot to mention that. This is a rather disappointing video to watch. In fact, so far, this might probably be the worst episode so far. And it's a shame because the other videos were pretty good. I mean, 1 or 2 is not that great, but for this one, it just left me a bit disappointed. And the good stuff that they introduced, like, what is that fly doing there? What made this episode disappointing was that it introduces a radio, which I would have been happy with alone, but because of the bad acting, because it's so not convincing, it just ruins it. The documentary stuff is handled very well, just like in the other videos. It just needed better delivery. I guess the delivery of the documentary in this episode is probably at its lowest. I hope the delivery and the acting will be better in future episodes if they decide to do the radio documentaries again. If they put in a radio, I hope the acting isn't as unconvincing and bad as it is. If you like what you see, please consider liking and subscribing to my channel, and I hope you have a good day or night, and take care.